cruise lovers and first timers, welcome back to the channel. Or if you're new here, I'm Jason.
I'm Roma.
And today we're diving deep into the Norwegian Encore. And not the shiny parts.
We did a 21-day Panama Canal cruise with the Norwegian Encore, and we are here to give you our honest review and feedback of what we thought.
So whether you're a first-time cruiser, a long-term cruiser, or comparing Norwegian versus other cruise lines, this video will give you an honest look at what to expect and what may surprise you.
So stick around because you are going to want to hear what really went down. From underwhelming food to thin entertainment to sales-heavy daily schedule. Let's get into it.
So let's start off with the food, because hey, that's a really big part of why you're cruising, isn't it?
You bet. So one of the issues we found on a longer cruise on the Norwegian Encore was that the food became very repetitive and disappointing.
For 21 days, the menu seemed to repeat over and over and over very quickly. It's like they took a 7-day menu, which would be fine for 7 days, and just kept redoing the same menu for 3 weeks in a row.
We did notice that some of the food lacked seasoning and lacked presentation, which was a bit of a surprise for us. We were expecting the food to be pretty good. And we did hear from other cruisers on the ship with us that they also found the same thing.
When we cruise, we're not usually someone who complains too much about the food. And I don't think we've ever sent back a meal on a cruise.
Never.
But on this one, it actually happened to us several times.
Which is surprising because we are not typically the people in a restaurant that are complaining or sending back our food, but it was pretty bad. We were not the only table sending back food, which even makes it more challenging when other people are doing the same because it's that bad. So what was it that we had that you really thought you had to send back? What were a couple of examples?
Steak was a big one. I ordered a steak on the first night of the cruise, and it was very sinewy and very tough, almost hard. Like it was a little hard to describe, but it was not a great steak. So I did actually send it back and ask for a new one.
It was hard to chew because he gave me a bite and I couldn't chew it.
And we also had another night where we had a chicken parmesan. It was extremely dry, very chewy. It did not fit with what you normally would expect for a chicken parmesan.
Usually, Jason and I look forward to the food on a cruise. A lot of times they are amazing meals. They're such beautiful sauces and flavorings, and we get excited about it. And so we were anticipating great meals. And this was the shock for us, was that we actually had to send food back.
And surprisingly, we actually found that there was a lot of nights where we would finish in one of the dining rooms. You do have 3 options. You've got the main dining room and you have savor and taste, which are a little bit smaller. We typically would go to savor or taste for the most part. Now, there was actually nights where we would eat our meal in savor or taste, not actually finish it, and end up going to the buffet in hopes of finding something that we would enjoy to actually make the night feel better.
And this was so frustrating to feel like the meals you ordered were so terrible you just had to leave. And so we got to the point, rather than sending back food, we would just eat enough and go, we're ready to go. And then we would just go to the buffet, which is so frustrating for the servers, frustrating for us, the cruisers. And so this was a big shock and a big disappointment for us, especially because we're on this ship for 21 days.
And yeah, it never actually got better throughout the term of the cruise. Things just continued that way for the whole 3 weeks.
The buffet was often overcrowded as people were looking for some variety, and I think, like us, a lot of the cruisers got a little tired of the main dining room quite early.
We were surprised. There was a lot of nights in the main dining room where quite a few tables were empty, and we don't normally see that on a ship.
No.
Usually a lot of people, unless it's a family-based cruise, in which case a lot of them do tend to hit the buffet, but on a longer cruise like this without many children on it, to have seats open in the dining room is
very rare. Now, the specialty dining menus and offerings were better, but keep in mind they're always at a cost.
And they don't change. If you want to eat in 𝐃𝐨𝐧'𝐭, which is their steakhouse on the first week, and you want to go again on week 2, you're going to get exactly the same menu on each week. And it's the same with all of their specialty dining restaurants. They do stay the same throughout the cruise. So obviously over a 3-week period, if you dine in them multiple times, you will be seeing the same menus.
So we actually ran into a cruiser on our ship who had more of an elite status. So he was entitled to 7 specialty dinings, and it was getting really redundant for him because there were certain ones that he just didn't think were up to par for his specialty dining certificates. So he kept going to the same 2 or 3, and of course their menu doesn't change. So this was a challenge even for the specialty dining.
In terms of the specialty dining, there was a couple, once again, that he said were really good. The one that stood out as not great value for him happened to be Food Republic. Food Republic only had a very limited offering, and it tended to be more of a tapas style, so appetizers, as opposed to getting appetizers, an entree, and dessert selection. You would only get a smaller selection on the menu.
Which was a bit odd because it was similar price to the other restaurants, and you would be using one of your specialty dining food credits if you chose to use it. So a lot of people told us the same thing, that they decided not to go there, and it was often empty.
We did actually go to the 𝐃𝐨𝐧'𝐿𝐵𝐻𝐵 restaurant as one of our choices for the specialty dining. And
Jason loves teppanyaki,
this
is a highlight for him.
I usually love teppanyaki, but I must say that I was very underwhelmed.
Which again, we are surprised. We were expecting it to be amazing. We've been on other ships and we've had teppanyaki on several ships, and we thought they were fun, they were engaging, the food's delicious, way too much. That's what we were expecting. What did we get, Jay?
Wow. In my past experiences with teppanyaki, you tend to have very entertaining people as your person preparing your food. They tend to be quite talented in terms of their singing ability, because that's a big part of teppanyaki, is they sing all these fantastic songs. Unfortunately, it appears that Norwegian has decided they're going to multitask their teppanyaki cooks. So they are pulling people off of the buffet and having them do teppanyaki, and unfortunately they don't really have quite that personality or the singing ability that you might expect from a teppanyaki experience. So unfortunately, we saw 4 different people cooking while we were there, and I would say not one of the 4 was super talented in terms of what we've seen in other teppanyaki restaurants.
This was probably not their specialty. They were probably filling in. You got the feeling that if everyone was filling in, what was real teppanyaki? So it was a bit underwhelming in that department. As far as the food goes, the show, you're chopping and they're throwing things. The show part of throwing the eggs up and doing all this, it was fantastic. It really was. But unfortunately, they were so into the show that a lot of our meats were overcooked. And that can be not so enjoyable if you've got steak and you maybe wanted it rare, or if you've got scallops, or if you've got shrimps. You really don't want those things overcooked.
No, you certainly don't. And actually, I should mention as well, we had 3 specialty dining meals on our trip. We did choose to use 2 of them in 𝐃𝐨𝐧'𝐭, the steakhouse. Our first meal in 𝐃𝐨𝐧'𝐭 was actually really good. They did a great job on it the first meal. Our second experience was not quite that way, unfortunately. Roma had ordered the prime rib for dinner, and unfortunately the night that we did it, we were actually in port and they had to do some inspections in the kitchen, and what they decided to do was to put our meal on hold halfway through it being cooked, and then with the prime rib, rather than giving us a new one, because this one was half cooked, they actually finished it on the grill, which if you've ever eaten prime rib, is not the way prime rib should be served. So
real disappointment. So they grilled my prime rib to re-warm it up. And this is a specialty dining restaurant that normally would be paid for. So we felt that that credit was really undervalued, and we were very frustrated. We understand that they have their tasks and they have to have inspections, but we would have happily waited for a fresh piece. Our second point is we're going to talk about staffing on the ship.
Unfortunately, the ship we were on seemed to be dramatically understaffed. And that's not something we've really experienced on cruise ships before. For the most part, if you have 4,000 people on the ship, they might have 2,000, 2,500 staff, and it seemed apparent that that was not the case on this ship.
The ratio of staff to people was a bit lower than expected.
Staff that we did have on board obviously tried to do their best. We found them to be very pleasant. We found them to be hardworking, but they were clearly trying to do a lot more than what they would normally be expected to do on a cruise. A good example of this that was quite evident right at the beginning, when you go to the main dining room in most ships, you will have a head waiter and an assistant waiter, and then you'll also have somebody that takes care of the beverages. On this cruise, there was no assistant waiter. So we did have someone that came and took our alcoholic beverage orders. If you didn't want anything from that, you would actually go to your waiter and ask for a non-alcoholic beverage, and he would take care of that. He took your orders, he brought your food, he cleared your plates, and did everything. Whereas most ships, that's spread amongst 2 people, and your level of service is just that much better than what you saw on this ship.
So we'll give you an example. Is Jason and I tend to order tea in the morning instead of coffee. And because they weren't used to maybe a lot of their cruisers having tea, they weren't prepared for that. And it seems that maybe it wasn't easy to access. So when we ordered tea, we were waiting usually 10 to 15 minutes just to get tea. And sometimes our breakfasts come and our beverages are still not there because the waiter is trying to figure out how to get all the tables served, how to get our meal, and then go to wherever the tea station is, which is obviously not close.
Another area where we saw this being quite evident was in the room attendant category. There was a lot of days where our room attendant wasn't able to get to our room, sometimes until mid or late afternoon. It's quite apparent that they've given them a lot more rooms to clean than what they might have had in the past. We saw our room attendant way down the hall from where our room was. So quite obviously he wasn't just looking after a cluster in our area.
He had a large territory.
Yeah. So no fault of his by any means. He was a great guy.
Absolutely. He did a
very
great
friendly.
job.
He knew our names every time we walked past him in the
polite.
hall. But obviously he was stretched very thin. So Norwegian really needs to look at staffing because customer satisfaction is going down drastically.
If you are going on a longer cruise on the Norwegian Encore, pack your patience and adjust your expectations. Service can be pretty inconsistent.
If you're enjoying this video and finding it informative, please give it a thumbs up and make sure to follow us for more cruise adventures.
Okay, now we're going to talk about the third category, and we have heard this actually a lot from other cruisers prior to going on this ship, and that is nickel and diming you.
Something that we've really noticed a lot on the Norwegian cruises is that the majority of their events seem to be focused on selling spa services, art auctions, jewelry, and trying to sell you future cruises.
For example, every day they would have different activities sponsored by various areas, and they were promoted as a learning activity. And so one day they had learn all about different hair types and hairstyles, and even have an example of someone style your hair. And I thought, oh, this will be a lot of fun. I'm going to go to this. And I went to this, and the first 45 minutes they were just selling product. And so it was very frustrating because I thought, well, that's 45 minutes I'm not getting back. I just wanted to see some hair demos. So I quickly learned not to go to any more of their presentations because they're really just sales presentations, which was a frustration for me.
And I found that when I looked at the daily events calendar, if there was 8 or 10 activities that were fun activities, a lot of times between the future cruises and the spa sales pitches they were giving, there would be 15 to 20 of those compared to 8 or 10 fun activities. That's clearly wrong.
There was a lot more weight given to sales activities than there were to fun activities to do. And on a long cruise, you have a lot less port days and a lot more time on the ship. So you notice when there are not a lot of activities and they're just selling. Something else we found a bit unusual, we have not seen this yet on any of the other major cruise lines, is that room service required a charge. So your meals earlier in the day were $4.95 for the service, and anything later in the day was $9.95 to get your room service.
Plus an 18% gratuity on top of the service charge. So that's just a bit unpleasant for a cruise. You go on a cruise thinking that most things will be included as part of the package, not to be asked for little bits of extra money here and there for things that should be part of the package.
Something else we have not seen on other ships is typically when you board your ship, you are allowed to bring 1 bottle of alcohol per person. And so sometimes Jason and I will each bring a bottle of wine, especially this was a longer cruise. So we thought we'll each bring 1 bottle of wine and we'll have it in our cabin. And we understand the rules and we checked them out. This was allowed. So we brought on each our 1 bottle of wine, and we were held up at embarkation and charged a corkage fee right there. So $15 US per bottle before we even got on the ship.
One thing to note is if you are a person who bought the drink package, which we didn't happen to on this trip, they don't charge you the corkage fee for that, which I guess that's nice, but most cruises don't charge
you the corkage fee at all. So we were a little bit underwhelmed with this. So Jason figured, well, if you're going to charge me the corkage fee, I'm going to drink on the ship wherever I want. Because typically we would save this for inside our cabins, but they charged us a corkage fee, so we just felt free to bring it to the dining room.
Another thing that I haven't seen on other cruise lines is in the casino, they actually have tables set up where they're selling you scratch and wins. And they were obviously their own scratch and wins, so they'd had them made up somewhere just to sell you on the cruise ship. So it just seemed like they're looking always for ways to make additional revenue off of each customer. And to me, that just tastes wrong.
It gets tiresome when you're always asked to buy this and buy that because you've paid good money to be on this ship and you feel like you're on vacation and everything should be fairly included. There were some game shows that they held as activities for people to either participate in or to watch, and they had a cost associated with them.
So if you wanted to participate and have a chance of winning something, you would have to pay an entry fee to get into it, which, once again, if you're classifying this as part of the evening entertainment, there's no actual show that you can go to, there isn't an event that's going on besides this, so the majority of the people on ship want to be involved, it seems wrong to ask for more money for this because it should be part of your entertainment.
Speaking of entertainment, our 4th point is that there was limited entertainment, being that this was a longer cruise. So Jason, tell us what we had. It won't take long.
No. So in the past few years, apparently, Norwegian has made a shift away from Broadway-style entertainment. On this particular cruise, we had 2 shows. One of them was Choir of Man, which, by the way, was
great.
excellent.
We recommend.
Enjoyed it. I actually saw it twice. It was a really good show. The guys did an amazing job. The only other show that they had was called Icons, which was pretty much the same cast, but unfortunately it did not have anywhere near the quality of what you got in Choir of Man. I found it to be a little cheesy, and the quality of the songs and stuff they were choosing wasn't very good. And the biggest disappointment though was Choir of Man was on not the first week, but the second week of our cruise. So the first week we didn't have anything. The second week we had Choir of Man, which they had it on 2 shows, so a 7 and a 9 o'clock or something like that. And then the next day they had it for 2 shows. And then it wasn't until the next week that you were able to watch Icons. So really, if you were only going once to the show, you had 2 shows for the whole entirety of a 21-day cruise. They don't have a cast of singers and dancers that put on shows.
No.
What they did have was Beatles, which I'm sure they were great for what they were.
And if you're on a short cruise, it might be fine.
But they were on day after day, and it was early Beatles, and then mid-Beatles, and then Beatles at the end of their career. And it just
replayed over and over. And if you love the Beatles, this was your ship.
And the other thing that they had a fair amount of was comedians. If you're a person who loves comedians and want to see them pretty much every night for 21 nights, you're well in luck because that was the other main entertainment they had on the ship.
But a lot of times they recycled their comedians, so it wasn't like a new show. It was the same show for maybe a week straight.
When you go on these big cruises, especially the long ones, you do expect a certain level of entertainment. and you expect that most nights you have the option of going to a quality show. And NCL has missed the mark by a mile.
By a mile. Something we found very unusual, which we haven't seen before, in the main atrium or theater as an evening show, as the event of the night, a lot of times the cruise director was hosting a game show, which seems not evening appropriate. It seemed like something fun to do at the pool or fun to do in the daytime, but in the evening you're expecting really quality presentation, not the cruise director pulling people out of the audience and doing the game show. That just didn't seem like the primary evening entertainment, and yet sometimes it was.
Exactly. Very disappointing. What we would suggest is, if you're looking for a ship that is going to give you high quality entertainment, NCL is not the way to go. You might want to look at a Royal Caribbean or maybe a Carnival, somewhere on another ship that actually still thinks that's something that has value to its clientele.
Talking about entertainment and activities, let's get into point number 5. They had very weak daily activities calendar. And we would get this calendar every day in our room, as well as on the app and on the TV. And every day, Jason would just about cry over what they had on the calendar, especially on the at-sea days. They're really stuck to what they have available, and their offerings were often very poor.
I don't know how often I've been on a ship where one of the main things that they were asking you to do was origami. They had that quite a number of times on our cruise where they said, make an origami envelope or make an origami crane. I'm sorry, I am not 12 years old. I have no desire to learn how to fold paper into animal shapes and things.
So this felt like an offering maybe for a younger person's or for someone more in the arts and crafts room, but this was a primary activity offering very regularly, and we thought, are you kidding us? This is not for adults. And of course, we're on a long cruise that doesn't have a lot of kids, so it just felt totally misplaced.
And even when they did events that you wanted to do, I'm a fairly big trivia person, and Roma likes to come with me sometimes. They had progressive trivia every afternoon at 12:15, which made no sense to any of us who liked trivia.
Such a bizarre time, really.
It's right in the middle of the lunch hour. So they actually did ask us if we wanted to vote to change it to a different time, which we all did. And they came back and said, I'm sorry, there isn't time in the schedule to move it to a different period.
Because there's origami.
So what I found with the entertainment is it really felt like they had taken a 7-day cruise and basically put the entertainment on a loop. So your trivia and all those other events just seem to happen over and over and over and over again. Where we've been on other long cruises where there was brand new activities day after day, and it never felt like it got old or that you just didn't want to bother and you would just rather sit in your room or sit around the pool when the weather's not great because there's nothing else to do.
Something that surprised us is there was very few fun, social, or cultural events. So especially as long-term travelers, we expect a variety of speakers or interesting classes or demonstrations from the culinary team or all sorts of things that we're like, ooh, that seems interesting. It could be a cooking class, it could be a language class, it could be a lot of things. And that was really not significant on this ship. So that's a letdown because you have a lot of at-sea days. We are there ready to soak, ready to learn and find things out. And that was not great.
So there were no regular speakers on this ship. We did have one person who talked a little bit about the Panama Canal on the day that we went through the canal. But other than that, there weren't any learning experiences. And what port presentations they did have seemed really more like they were geared to sell you an excursion than they were to be informative about the port that you were going to.
Yes, no daily learning sessions. And when they did have lessons, they were kind of misplaced as well, in that one time they offered us, a couple of times actually, they offered us Portuguese lessons. But none of the countries we were going to were in Brazil. So it didn't really make sense. We weren't going to any Portuguese ports. It's not like we needed to know a few words. Another language offering was Zulu. Again, we're not even near Africa, so it doesn't really make sense.
Which was too bad, because there was lots of opportunity to have Spanish lessons, for example, for when we got off in port in Panama.
Costa Rica,
exactly.
Guatemala.
So, Mexico. So, there was a lot of places Spanish would have come in handy, but Spanish wasn't offered as one of the languages they were going to teach on the cruise.
So, just unusually placed activities that didn't really resonate with us.
And speaking of unusually placed, movies were offered at 11 p.m. And some of these movies were 3 hours long, which means you're up until 2 a.m. watching a movie.
Yeah, it does not make sense at all that it was so late, because it's not like we've got fantastic other shows and it's somehow we need to navigate around them. We're navigating around the game show held by the cruise director.
And another thing that was a bit disappointing, well, quite disappointing, they seemed to have 5 or maybe 6 movies that they just showed over and over and over again. So if you were happy watching that movie, good news, you get to watch it 5 times during the cruise.
So again, that feel of these are just 7-day cruises and we're going to stick them all together, even though it was a much longer journey. So it didn't make us feel like our longer journey was very special.
And the last thing that about the movies that was not spectacular, most of the time when they have these movies showing, they show them in the main theater where you've got comfortable seats and you've got the big screen. These movies were shown in the atrium, which was in the lobby of the ship, and chairs weren't comfortable. And
it was loud. Yeah,
it was a big loud kind of space. So in summary, on a ship that we were expecting a bit of enrichment, a little bit of learning, weeks of great activities and lots of fun, it felt a lot more like we were being undersold, yet they tried to sell us stuff at every turn.
Our 6th point was there was overcrowding and poor people flow. Now we're going to tell you where and how this applied. First off, the embarkation was really poorly planned. We got a boarding time, but your boarding time really means nothing. We'd chosen an early boarding slot. We'd asked for the 10 a.m. We got a 10 a.m. slot. We thought, great, we'll be there super early and we'll get on the boat. And they just kind of, in any haphazard order, just wherever, they just picked groups. It was the strangest thing. And so we didn't get on the boat till 1:30, which was very frustrating when you're there specifically at 9:30 because you're supposed to be half an hour early from your boarding time, and we're just sitting there for hours. So the embarkation was a bit of a gong show.
It was terrible. One thing that we found quite odd about this ship is there's really only 2 areas on the ship that aren't alcoholic lounges for you to spend time. There is the atrium, which once again is in the lobby, and then there's the observation lounge. Now, the observation lounge is a beautiful space.
Really nice.
It's up near the top of the ship, right at the front of the ship.
Lots
it's got
of big
windows all the way around.
Stunning.
Lots of comfortable seating. Now, unfortunately, it was packed every day.
All the time.
From 7:30 in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. It was hard to find a seat. And it was also not the quiet space that it's billed as. If you watch a lot of other videos, people talk about, oh, we spent some time in the observation lounge and it was so quiet and relaxing. Well, on our cruise, it was not. You would have groups of people who are sitting around a big area and they're talking at full bore.
Well, this was their designated meeting space, which is really unusual that they're meeting and doing meetings and activities in the observation lounge, because it's got signs saying these are quiet spaces. So clearly there's some miscommunication there.
So if you had a drink package and you wanted to sit around and drink all day, there were other lounges for you to sit in. But if you didn't want to be in the atrium or the observation lounge and you wanted another quiet space on the ship, pretty much your room was your option.
I'm going to tell you about the other main sitting space, which was the atrium. This is an atrium like no other. This is an atrium that is very dark and there is a second level to it, but it's really a restaurant there, so you're really just looking down onto it. It's not those comfortable seatings in the open space and
you're seating your food
along a rail, eating the food, perhaps watching a movie at 11 o'clock at night. But it's really not a very large space. And instead of having a lot of really big chairs or couches or anything like that, they had bucket chairs, which themselves were fine, although very large and clunky to move around. And because they weren't able to seat that many people, they therefore would bring out folding chairs in the main atrium. I truly felt like a community hall with the darkness and the folding chairs and people wandering around. It just felt like a community hall.
Never seen anything like it.
We have never, ever seen this on a ship. So that was the feel of the other main seating area. So not exactly a lot of choice there.
The area that we usually love on cruise ships is the library. Now, this ship did have a library, which was nice. You did have the option, and they actually had a fairly good selection of books for you to choose from.
They did.
The bad part about it, well, twofold. There was two things. One, all the books were locked behind glass shelves, which is fine, but the library person who was there to allow you to get the books out would only be there twice a day for a 2-hour period. So you really had to make sure you were there during that certain time, otherwise you couldn't get a book. And there's an activity that you actually want to do going on at that time, because you would need to skip it in order to go to the library. Right?
So the library only had 4 hours a day, really limited hours, and you couldn't access the books otherwise. So it was very unusual for a ship library. Ship libraries usually have a lot more access, so this was a bit strange. And what else did we not like about the library, Jay?
Well, the library was actually the games room. So there was no comfortable chairs, there was no place you could sit and quietly read one of the books that you might want to take out, because there was 4 tables that were constantly full of people playing backgammon or Scrabble or other board games that they wanted to play, or cards, which nothing wrong with that.
That's awesome.
The games room.
It's the games room.
But there should be an alternate library if you don't have space in there for people to sit.
Yeah, so you would think, okay, I'm gonna borrow a book during the limited hours that they have, borrow a book, and there really wasn't somewhere where you could quietly go and read this book. So,
because as we mentioned, the atrium was loud, the observation lounge was loud,
was crowded.
The other places, they were bugging you for if you wanted a drink or not, so you couldn't really sit in there and read for a long period of time. So it was a bit disappointing in the sense of what the library should be on a ship. Let's move on to point number 7. Something that we've talked a bit about already, and it's something that I really think that Norwegian had missed the boat on. No pun intended. Well, really. What they're missing is the opportunity for long-term programming. When you take a repositioning cruise like this was, or just a longer cruise, you can't treat it like it's 2 or 3 small cruises and just keep recycling the same things over and over. When it's a longer cruise, you need to provide things that long-term cruisers are looking for. And when we've talked to other people on the ships, they all agree they want the lecturers on board. They want people that are going to give them something to give them information, keep them entertained. Other cruises we've been on have had astronomers, directors from movies, TV celebrities, just people that have interesting things to tell you and to teach you. And Norwegian has really missed it on this.
Another way that Norwegian has missed their opportunity with their long-term cruisers is they've really missed their chance to create connection. Whenever we were on other ships, if we joined trivia, which of course Jason loves to join, or group activities, they would often say, hey, you can have a group of up to so many people, so please find other people to join with. And they would really push and encourage, like, teammate, find a team, belong somewhere. And of course, on a long cruise, you're gonna start to get to know some of the same people and have conversations, and you're gonna meet people, and you're gonna have some friends. Whereas on this cruise, they were very clear, you can play by yourself. You do not need to join a team. You do not need to have friends. You can just sit by yourself. So it really discouraged people from wanting to join shared activities.
And I think that's a real drawback for long-term cruisers. I mean, there was over 400 solo travelers on this cruise, and while they did have special solo activities, they weren't really pushed to join and become a part of other groups. So I think that's a real shortcoming on the behalf of Norwegian.
We noticed even when it came to mealtime, not very often were we ever asked if we were interested in joining a share table. Sometimes, but not very often. So kind of push for join, talk to people, socialize really wasn't there. And I think long-term cruisers are kind of looking for that and expecting that.
Let's talk a little bit about how Norwegian compares to other lines.
Now, we haven't cruised on all the other lines yet, so stay tuned because we will report on it.
But we've talked to a lot of other cruisers who have obviously taken a lot of cruises. There's some people we've chatted with that have taken 150 plus. And what they've told us about Norwegian versus other lines is a little bit of this.
When comparing Norwegian to Princess, they say that Princess offers better food and entertainment.
When they talk to us about Norwegian versus Royal Caribbean, they say that Royal Caribbean is a lot more innovative, so they try new things and they're always on the cutting edge, and they're also much better for entertainment as well.
Now when comparing Norwegian versus Carnival, may be more fun focused for a very similar price, if not a little bit less.
That's why they call them the fun ships. And then finally, if we're talking about Norwegian versus Holland America, they say that Holland America delivers a lot more quiet and refined cruise experience. So typically, maybe a little bit of an older crowd.
A little more panache. So here is our conclusion of the Norwegian Encore.
So number one was food. We found the food to be quite repetitive, and we didn't really find the quality to be very good at all.
We found the ship understaffed and inconsistent in quite a few areas.
The entertainment had a very sparse lineup. There wasn't a lot to do unless you were looking for something where you had the chance to spend some more money on Norwegian.
Many of the events were sales focused and not people focused, which after several days you really start to feel and it begins to weigh on you.
If we're going to give you a recommendation, we'd say that sailing on the Norwegian Encore would be great for first-time cruisers who haven't really experienced what other ships have to offer, and for people who don't really mind their food being a little bit repetitive or maybe not quite as high a quality.
This might also even be ideal for somebody who's going on a shorter cruise and has a lot of port days and a lot of activities already built in naturally to your cruise itinerary.
That way you're off the ship a lot and you don't really notice the lack of quality in the food or the amount of entertainment options that you have.
We would say that this particular cruise is not ideal for anyone who's a long-term seasoned cruiser, for those who are foodies, or those who value any sort of enrichment, learning, training, any of those types of things.
Let us know in the comments. Have you sailed on the Norwegian Encore? Did you love it or did you loathe it?
If you found this review helpful, please like, hit subscribe, and share this video with your friends.
Thanks for tuning in to Blue Sky Travelers. See you next time.